Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to at whatever part of the world you are. Thank you for taking your time to listen to our follow-up presentation from the IDRiM conference. My name is Nombulelo Ngulube. I'm a PhD candidate at Kyoto University, currently on my third year. Basically, on my research, I mostly focus on the need for community engagement and participation, most importantly in post-disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation initiatives. So for today, part of my research is actually looking at how communities would want to be involved, especially when trying to engage them effectively in participatory post-disaster relocation and housing reconstruction. So basically, this part of our research, it's more of a community perspective. We want to give voices to the communities who are affected by natural hazards and disasters around the world. So for my talk, it's going to be divided into almost 7 sub-themes. First, I'll give the introduction, the background of the study, the aims and the objectives, the methodology used to collect the data, introduce the findings, and then lastly, give the conclusions to the study. So as we all know that over the last century or so, the intensity and frequency and also the magnitude of disasters has since escalated, leaving behind a huge socio-economic impact and trail reported in the numbers of lives lost, economic losses, and also those affected by the disasters. And also, when we look at different data sources, it has also been indicated that disasters have also internally displaced people around the world. For example, when we look at disasters recorded in Asia and also sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, the frequency of those populations affected internally has also escalated. So basically, numerous governments and departments, they have tried to come up with initiatives in bouncing forward after disaster scenarios. And these encounter or proclaim like recovery planning, reconstruction and rehabilitation through initiatives such as the land use readjustment, relocations, and economic recovery, just to stipulate a few. And also there's initiatives, they have been meant to minimize vulnerabilities of the affected communities and also increase their future opportunities. Numerous frameworks and guidelines have called for the inclusion of disaster survivors, who are the communities affected by the disaster, to be part of the recovery planning process as a way to build back better. But governments have focused more on the build back better from a structural viewpoint, such as focusing mostly on structural safety, safety modeling, and sophisticated early warnings. But they have overly failed to try and engage communities on the type of reconstruction they want, hence failing to address the actual needs of the affected communities. And ways of involving communities or engaging them still remains under subject to controversy, even though numerous researchers have stipulated ways of engaging communities, but these still remain ill-defined across the board. Sorry, one moment. I think I'm failing to move my slides. Can I stop the share? Sorry, I think I'm finding like some technical issues. Okay, let me. Sorry, everyone. I'm finding some technical issues in moving my slides. So basically, as I was saying, like ways of involving and engaging the communities still remain ill-defined, and hence the exact nature of participation still remains ill-defined. So these are evidences from past studies of not so successful reconstruction projects because they took more of a top-down approach and they did not engage community stakeholders in the overall reconstruction planning, and hence reconstruction failed to address the actual community needs. Some of those examples include the Talcobon housing after the Typhoon Yolanda, and also the earthquake housing in Chile after the 2010 Chilean earthquake, and also after the Great Indian Ocean tsunami through the Bande Aceh housing. So as we all know that currently through climate change, mostly countries in Southern Hemisphere, especially in Africa, they are facing tropical cyclones. For example, in 2017, Southern Africa was affected by Cyclone Dineo, which affected Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Southern Africa, and Malawi. So the worst affected area in Zimbabwe was Cholocho district, where the disaster killed more than 251 people and displaced over 800 people, and about 190 were moved to temporary shelters. And through this, the government, through its reconstruction plan, which took more of a top-down approach, engaged in the government-driven approach using the disaster management policy framework. So the disaster management policy framework initiated the relocation of disaster-affected low-lying communities and also construction of disaster housing for the affected communities. For example, the government preceded that they were going to construct 143 houses in Chino and 176 houses in Saudweni for the disaster-affected communities. But when we went for our fieldwork collection, we realized that there was no sustainable development because the relocation housing was left abandoned by the disaster beneficiaries. The reasons for this unsustainable development was that there was non-consultation of communities, there was failure to consider the livelihood restoration of the affected communities, and also there was politicization of the reconstruction projects, and lastly, there was the non-consideration of the cultural aspect in the housing design. So our research mostly wanted to examine the community's perspective on their desired processes of participation to determine effective participatory reconstruction through relocation and housing reconstruction and their perceived outcomes. So basically, we wanted to find out what people want and what they would hope for in a reconstruction project. So for our data collection, we made use of the qualitative research design, because we all know that the qualitative research design gives an in-depth understanding of the study area, the study topic, and also due to its ability to expound on social realities, it dives deep on and answers questions like why, and respondents are given the voice to plot out their feelings. So the data collection took place in 2 stages. So the first stage, we interviewed communities who were relocated to Chino and Saudweni. So we collected data through interviews, focus group discussions, and observations to try and follow up, because most of the respondents, most of the disaster beneficiaries, they actually returned to the old location. We saw it fit to collect more data. So in the second stage, we followed up on the disaster victims who had returned to the old location. So we focused on Bamba, Mapili, Mahlosi, which was more of the new, the old site where the people used to stay. So in this instance, we used the online questionnaire and also telephonic interviews for the key stakeholders. So in our data collection, we focused on these key 6 theme questions. So firstly, we wanted people to voice out on what should be done to ensure effective participation, and also why communities were supposed to be involved, who is supposed to be involved, and why. And also we wanted to know how what the relocation and reconstruction project should focus on, and also try to base on what processes and perceived outcomes would come up from an effective relocation project. And also lastly, we wanted to find out like what would be the outcomes of the project if residents were not involved. So these were the main key questions which were asked to the respondents. So firstly, we wanted to find out, like, the community is really interested in taking part or participating in recovery projects, of which from our data, we realized that there was a strong willingness of communities to participate in post-disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation planning. That's showing the need that communities do want to participate in post-disaster recovery. And then we also wanted to find out, like, how would they want to participate? So communities also voiced out that it was important for them to participate because it was going to give them the ability to express their views. There was going to be better understanding of the concerned communities, and also it was going to capacitate them, and there was going to be consensus building and informed decision making, thus leading to ownership and trust and transparency building. So from that data, we formed a word cloud on why people wanted to participate. So most of the keywords were more of like decisions. They wanted to be involved. They indicated things like needs, engagement, wants, and also the need for community and opinions was raised through the word cloud, which we developed from our data. And also, we asked the communities how they would want to participate. And overall, there were three main ways which the communities wanted to participate in post-disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation planning, which was mostly dialogue with the government officials, and also being able to express their needs in meetings, and also having dialogue with other villagers. They also indicated other ways of participation, such as taking part as community members, being able to submit their opinions through questionnaire surveys, and also through access to information. So from the findings, the respondents indicated their perceived or their preferred process of participation, which we identified 5 key points, of which the first one was the representation of all stakeholders, the power to influence decisions, early engagement of community members, the incorporation of local knowledge, and capacity building. So when we come to the fair representation of all stakeholders, the respondents indicated that this was an essential process to consider effective participation. And hence, they indicated that responsible authorities should ensure that everyone in the community is well represented. The majority of the respondents highlighted the need for everyone to play an active role and to be fairly represented. And also the respondents indicated that there was need to engage women and the youth so that at the end of the day, they have inclusive disaster risk reduction. When it came to power to influence decisions, the ability to voice and influence decision by Sherry Einstein is viewed as the highest form of citizen participation. And respondents indicated that authorities should not dictate programs to the communities, and community members should be able to voice out their views, and their views should be implemented. And hence, one of the respondents indicated that when reconstruction planning starts, us as stakeholders, we should allow them, meaning the community members, to have a voice and say in some of the things, and we mustn't always want to impose on them. We should allow them to have ideas on what would work better for them. We must be partners. So this was more of like a key stakeholder response. So here, local community respondents cited that there was need for them to be consulted and have their views taken into consideration. When we moved on to the early engagement of members, numerous respondents indicated that all stakeholders in the community should be engaged from the initial stages of the program, for example, from program start to program finish. And this view was also shared by both the local respondents and the critical stakeholders. They indicated that the early engagement of community members fostered communities to identify with the project, hence leading to project ownership. And then when it came to incorporation of local knowledge, they indicated that it was an important process that was overlooked in the post-disaster relocation and housing reconstruction project, because there is a need for the relevant authorities to know about the cultural dynamics of the affected communities when planning for recovery projects. So the respondents raised 3 key points, such as being able to understand the culture, being able to understand the people's needs, and also consulting with the people is they are familiar with their surroundings. So also there was the need to use locally available labor and skills so that people identify with the program. So this finding was more prudent to other findings done by other scholars that when doing recovery planning or planning for relocation housing, it was crucial for the authorities to understand the cultural dynamics of the affected communities. And then when it came to capacity building, the respondents indicated that this was a core to ensuring a practical participatory approach. So the area under study, it's characterized by low education levels. So the community members indicated that there was need for the communities themselves to be taught on how to participate in decision-making and planning with the relevant stakeholders. Is maybe to some extent the lack of capacity could hinder locals from participating effectively, especially in the decision-making process. For example, one of the local residents indicated that I think it is important for community members to be educated on how to effectively work and share opinions and ideas with government stakeholders. So the same sentiment was also shared by one of the key stakeholders. So when it came to the second part, of the research objective on actually finding out the perceived outcomes of their participation. The first one, which was indicated by the respondents, was project ownership. So they indicated that project ownership or the utilization of the project outcomes is considered as an essential outcome to a participatory project. For example, to attain a full ownership of a project by beneficiaries, there was need for them to be involved in the projects. The project should serve their needs, and also the projects should not be detected to them. For example, one of the respondents indicated that I think if the respondents are included from the planning stage, if consultations are made with the residents from the onset, the residents are more likely to identify with the program or the project, and they'll put an effort to ensure that the project is a success. So also respondents indicated that if communities are not consulted, there will be no project ownership, but rather projects would be abandoned through the use of words such as white elephants by numerous stakeholders. And also they indicated that if communities are effectively involved, the other outcome would be the successful implementation of project objectives. For example, the respondents indicated that if there is a participatory approach, the projects will be completed in a timely manner. For example, one of the key stakeholders indicated that I think from my own viewpoint, the most possible result should be the achievement of the planned projects, which would have been decided by them. And we should have the ability to finish them on time and beneficiaries receiving the post-disaster housing within the set time frame. So some of the respondents indicated that the failure to complete projects in time is a negative consequence, as beneficiaries will lose interest in the recovery and rehabilitation process, hence prolonging the whole process. So as a way to conclude this study, we initiated that to be able to build back better and have sustainable redevelopment after natural disasters, and so that there is effective relocation, post-disaster affected communities should be put at the center of the recovery, planning, and reconstruction process. And also national governments and key stakeholders must engage and embrace bottom-up approaches in relocation and housing reconstruction initiatives. And moreover, communities are not just disaster victims, but they are key architects towards the success and failure of disaster risk reduction projects. So, for example, we are driving that community members or community residents must be treated as major stakeholders when it comes to post-disaster recovery planning in the reconstruction process. So these are the references to some of the key points which we discussed on our study. And thank you for listening. And I would greatly appreciate any questions, comments, and suggestions in improving the quality of our research. Thank you very much.